December 7th, 1941. A date that would live in infamy. But what if the infamy wasn't just the attack itself? What if the real betrayal happened in the weeks before, in the shadowed corridors of Washington, where warnings were silenced and men died for a cause they never knew they served? Franklin Delano Roosevelt sat at his desk, the weight of a decision pressing down on his shoulders. America was determined to stay out of Europe's war. But Roosevelt knew something the American people didn't. The world was burning, and neutrality was no longer an option. The polls were clear. 80% of Americans opposed joining another foreign war. Roosevelt had promised, again and again, that American boys would not be sent to fight overseas. But promises in the hands of desperate men become flexible things. Across the Pacific, Japan's military machine was grinding forward. French Indochina had fallen. The Dutch East Indies were next. America's oil embargo was strangling Japan's war effort, and Tokyo's generals were growing desperate. Desperate men make dangerous choices. But Roosevelt had eyes in the darkness. A team of American cryptographers had cracked Japan's diplomatic code, designated Purple. Every message between Tokyo and its embassies flowed through Washington first. Roosevelt was reading Japan's mail, and what he read should have terrified him. November 26, 1941. Secretary of State Cordell Hull delivered an ultimatum to Japanese diplomats. Withdraw from China. Abandon the Axis alliance. Return to the status quo. Tokyo called it the Hull Note. They also called it a declaration of war. Japan's response came not in words, but in steel and silence. Admiral Yamamoto assembled a strike force of 6 aircraft carriers, the most powerful naval task force ever assembled. Their destination was a closely guarded secret. Their target? Pearl Harbor. The first warning came on December 1st. Dutch intelligence intercepted messages indicating a massive Japanese naval movement. They alerted the British. The British alerted Washington. The warning climbed the chain of command, and then, mysteriously, stopped. Admiral Husband Kimmel commanded the Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. He received routine warnings about possible sabotage. Nothing about a carrier strike force. Nothing about an imminent attack. His ships sat in neat rows, perfect targets, while Washington remained silent. December 6th, 11:30 p.m. Roosevelt received the first 13 parts of Japan's final message. It was a declaration, an ending of negotiations. The 14th part would arrive in the morning, and everyone in that room knew what it meant. Roosevelt looked up at Harry Hopkins, his closest advisor. "This means war," he said quietly. But no urgent warnings went to Pearl Harbor that night. No orders to prepare for attack. The fleet slept peacefully, unaware that war was already 6 hours away. 230 miles north of Oahu, Yamamoto's strike force prepared. 360 aircraft armed and ready. Pilots received final briefings. Photos of Pearl Harbor's layout memorized. The element of surprise was total, or so they believe. 7:02 a.m., December 7th. 2 Army privates operating a radar station on Oahu's north shore spotted something impossible. A massive formation approaching from the north. They called their superior officer. He told them it was probably just some B-17s and hung up. 7:53 a.m. The first wave struck. Torpedo bombers screamed in low over the water, their shadows racing across the harbor. Battleship Row erupted in geysers of water and fire. Sailors rushed from their bunks, confused, still in their underwear, running toward hell. The USS Arizona took a direct hit to her forward magazine. The explosion tore the ship apart from inside. 1,100 men died in seconds. Their screams were swallowed by the roar of destruction that echoed across the harbor like the opening of Pandora's box. In Washington, it was just past noon. Roosevelt received the news by phone from Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox. "Mr. President, Pearl Harbor has been attacked." Roosevelt's response, according to witnesses, was surprisingly calm, almost as if he'd been expecting it. But questions emerged immediately, whispered in the halls of power. Why was the Pacific Fleet concentrated in Pearl Harbor like sitting ducks? Why were the aircraft carriers conveniently absent? Why did no warning reach Admiral Kimmel in time? Admiral Kimmel and General Short, the Army commander in Hawaii, were made scapegoats. Relieved of duty within days, their careers destroyed. But both men would spend decades claiming they'd been set up, denied critical intelligence that Washington possessed all along. The day after Pearl Harbor, Roosevelt addressed Congress. Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The speech lasted 6 minutes. The vote for war took 33 minutes. Isolationism died in the smoke over Pearl Harbor. America was finally in the war. Young men lined up at recruitment offices by the thousands. The sleeping giant had awakened. But was it awakened? Or was it pushed? That question haunted investigators for decades, and the answer remained buried in classified files. In 1944, with victory in sight, Congress launched an investigation. But key documents had disappeared. Witnesses had convenient memory lapses. The official conclusion? Pearl Harbor was a failure of communication and preparedness. Many didn't believe it then, many still don't. Consider the evidence. 8 separate warnings of imminent attack reached Washington. All were either ignored or downplayed. The aircraft carriers, America's most valuable assets, were sent away on convenient training exercises. The obsolete battleships remained behind. In 1946, the Joint Congressional Investigation interviewed hundreds of witnesses. One recurring testimony stood out. High-ranking officers claiming they'd sent urgent warnings to Hawaii that never arrived. Messages that vanished in the Washington bureaucracy like ghosts in fog. British intelligence officer Eric Nave claimed in 1991 that he'd personally delivered intercepts to Washington, proving Japan would strike Pearl Harbor. His message specified the date, December 7th, but no record of his warning exists in American archives, deleted or never recorded. The winds execute message remains one of history's greatest controversies. Multiple operators reported receiving Japan's coded war signal days before the attack, but the transcripts disappeared. Operators were ordered never to speak of it. Some refused to obey that silence. Roosevelt needed America in the war. Britain was on the brink of collapse. Stalin was bleeding on the Eastern Front. If democracy was to survive, America had to fight. But the American people would never agree. Not unless attacked first. Not unless blood demanded blood. Henry Stimson, Secretary of War, wrote in his diary on November 25th, "The question was how we should maneuver them into firing the first shot." Those words, discovered decades later, sent shockwaves through historical circles. Was Pearl Harbor an orchestrated sacrifice? McCollum Memo, October 1940. Lieutenant Commander Arthur McCollum wrote a strategy document outlining 8 actions to provoke Japan into war with America. Roosevelt implemented 7 of them. The 8th was patience. Wait for Japan to strike first. The oil embargo, the asset freeze, the military buildup in the Philippines. Each action tightened the noose around Japan's neck. Tokyo had 2 choices: surrender its imperial ambitions or fight. Roosevelt knew which they'd choose. Perhaps he counted on it. But even if Roosevelt wanted war, did he want Pearl Harbor? Could he have allowed 2,400 Americans to die just to galvanize the nation? The question torments historians because the answer condemns either Roosevelt's morality or his competence. Both are unthinkable. Robert Stinnett spent 17 years researching his book, Day of Deceit. He obtained dozens of declassified documents through Freedom of Information requests. His conclusion? Roosevelt knew. He knew when, he knew where, and he let it happen. Critics called him a conspiracy theorist. The truth is probably somewhere in the murky middle. Roosevelt wanted war, but perhaps expected Japan to strike the Philippines, where American forces were prepared. Pearl Harbor's devastation exceeded all calculations. Sometimes even the best laid plans spiral into chaos. December 7th changed everything. America became an industrial war machine overnight. Women took factory jobs. Rationing began. The nation united behind a single purpose. The attack, horrific as it was, transformed America into the arsenal of democracy. By war's end, America emerged as a superpower. The old isolationist nation was gone forever. Pearl Harbor created the modern American military-industrial complex, the permanent national security state, the global American empire. One attack, endless consequences. But the men of Pearl Harbor paid the price. 2,400 sailors, soldiers, and civilians dead, 1,200 wounded, families shattered, ships destroyed. And for what? Freedom, yes. Democracy, certainly. But also for secrets that remain locked away even today. Admiral Kimmel died in 1968, still fighting to clear his name. His family continued the battle for decades, demanding access to classified documents. In 1999, Congress passed a resolution stating Kimmel and Short had been denied vital intelligence. Vindication came too late. Today, documents remain classified. Entire files from 1941 are still restricted. supposedly to protect intelligence methods from World War II. But what methods? What sources? Why, 84 years later, does the government still guard those secrets so jealously? Perhaps we'll never know with certainty what Roosevelt knew. Perhaps the truth died with him in 1945. Or perhaps it's simpler. Great leaders sometimes make terrible calculations, weighing thousands of lives against millions, and living with the mathematics of morality. Pearl Harbor taught America that isolation was impossible in a connected world. It proved that democracy must sometimes fight to survive. But it also demonstrated that governments keep secrets, that history is written by those in power, and that truth is often the first casualty of war. The USS Arizona Memorial stands today in Pearl Harbor, a white bridge over a sunken grave. Oil still bubbles up from the ship's hull, called the Tears of the Arizona. 1,100 men remain entombed below. Their sacrifice was real, whatever the reasons behind it. History is not a simple story of heroes and villains. It's complex, contradictory, and uncomfortable. Roosevelt may have been both, the man who saved democracy and the man who sacrificed his own people. Sometimes greatness and guilt wear the same face. December 7th, 1941, the day America changed forever. But the real question remains, did America change because of an attack? Or did America allow an attack to force that change? The answer lies somewhere in the gap between what we know and what we're told. Thanks for watching, and thanks for all your likes, comments, and subscriptions. Let me know in the comments what you want me to cover next.